Hey guys, this is Lala Legacy and welcome to Pale Cachexia. So this game was given to me, thank you to Argent Games. They wanted me to review this game, so that's what I'm gonna do. I want to say right off the bat that the illustration just on this beginning, the menu page, is phenomenal. Like, this is extremely pretty. And I actually had to Google how to say cachexia because I had no idea what this word was. But it means, or for those that don't know, it means like the weakening due to like severe chronic illness. It's almost like the people who sent me this game, Argent Games, kind of knew that I have a chronic illness myself. So this is going to be really, really interesting. Also, as I was looking through here before I started, I saw that they had accessibility options, and I wanted to go through this with all of you because I think this is really, really, really cool. So it has like disabling of bright flashes, audio cue, subtitles, and open dyslexic font. That is amazing. I think this is the first game I've ever seen those options. So honestly, great freaking job already. I am already impressed. All right, so I really don't know anything about this game. I literally made it a point not to look at anything about this game before I started, not even the trailer, because I want to go into this blind, because I do not want to have any preconceptions of this game. All right, so let's go. Lonely. Strangely lonely. Those words surfaced in her mind as she gazed up towards the towering trees, their branches extending forever in all directions. They made her feel so small and insignificant, like a frail leaf on the wind, at the mercy of wherever it took her. Lonely. There was no other way to describe this place. God, the art is beautiful. Esther. What a pretty name. Just a little while earlier, she'd stepped out of her hired carriage, leaving the main road to explore these woods. Esther's driver had warned her that the forest was seldom visited. If she ran out of supplies, she'd have to walk back to the road on foot, and hope to flag down a stagecoach heading to the city. And that forest is haunted, girl. Dangerous for anybody, let alone someone with the pail. I wouldn't head in there if I were you, and seeing as it's almost evening, I'll take you back to town for free. But she'd refused the driver's offer, turning away from her last hope. It was impossible. The decision would haunt her forever, a hanging mystery of what she might have discovered. No matter how isolated or helpless these vast woods made her feel, she promised herself she wouldn't leave without answers. A light breeze brushed past Esther's cheeks. Also, I'm looking at her skirt and I'm just like, I have a skirt that is identical to that. Girl, she actually kind of looks like me. This is, oh my god. Argent Games, did you do this on purpose? Did you send me this game on purpose? It carried the fragile scent of spring, though a lingering, wintry chill still blanketed the forest. Spring always made her symptoms worse, however. Same. As everything gathered its energy to bloom and flower, her lethargy only seemed to become deeper and darker. The more vibrant Esther's surroundings grew, the more she felt her energy draining away. Some days, she barely had the strength to even move. and yet she couldn't bring herself to hate the season. Guys, was Esther written about me? It hardly seemed fair to be angry at the world for turning its cycles, for life continuing on around her just like it always had. Even now, she still remembered when spring was her very favorite time of all. Esther suddenly came to a halt. I still cannot get over how much she actually looks like me. Like, down to the hairstyle, or not style, but like, the type of hair and everything. Bending down, she curiously patted the forest floor, searching for whatever it was. After a moment, her fingers brushed something small and cold. A key? What was a key doing out here in the middle of nowhere? Oh, and when I say an all, like, her skin tone is exactly what mine is, too. I mean, I get a little bit more pale in the winter, but like, come spring, and when I get to go outside a little bit more, just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of sun, and I am like, darker. Because I'm native. So her skin tone is like exactly mine. Puzzled, Esther turned the tiny, shimmering piece of metal over in her palm. No marks, symbols, or engravings. It could have belonged to anyone or anything. After a long moment, she rose slowly back to her feet, slipping the key into her skirt pocket. The skirt has pockets? Perhaps it was a good omen. She'd always had a hard time with superstition or questions of fate, preferring the calm logic of cause and effect to anything unseen. But these days, as the world's realities seemed to grow ever bleaker, Esther found herself hoping for something more. It didn't really matter whether things like omens or destiny were actually real, as long as they made life a little less unforgiving. I am already in love with this. With a small flicker of hope in her heart, Esther turned to carry on once more. She had no map, no directions, and almost no clue as to what she was searching for. Only the faintest trail of a possible cure. Wow, that's gorgeous. As the hours passed by, all sense of time was devoured by a sea of unending trees. The forest's dreamy springtime varnish faded to a ghostly gloom. The cheerful birdsong replaced by rustling crickets and distant ominous howls. A painful sting suddenly shot across Esther's arm. It yanked her out of her absent-minded wandering back into the oppressive emptiness of the forest. After a moment, she realized she'd walked too close to the brambles. Warm droplets oozed down her wrist, an uncomfortable reminder to always watch her step. As Esther gazed down at the small, welling beads of blood on her flesh, her surprise began to shift into a sense of gnawing doubt. Perhaps she really had gone too far after all. If there really was anything, or anyone, within these woods, she would have stumbled across it by now. And if the rumors were false, just another folktale made from empty hope, spinning more empty hope in a vicious cycle. Was all of this nothing but a dead end? Had her whole journey been pointless? Would she have to tell them she'd failed? Idiot, Esther muttered aloud, struck by a sudden sense of self-loathing. Those harsh thoughts could be dealt with later, but she couldn't keep stumbling through the darkness so pointlessly. Failure or not, it didn't change where she was now. She had a flint and tinder in her satchel, along with a little water and rations. If she gathered some loose branches, at least she could make a fire to keep warm. It wasn't the first night Esther had spent alone in the middle of nowhere, and it surely wouldn't be the last. Slowly, cautiously, she crept through the thick underbrush. The moon's faint glow offered enough light for Esther to find a few branches long and dense enough for a campfire. But every time she crouched down to forage, her fingers searching through the cold, damp earth, it felt like someone was breathing right behind her ear. Esther shook off the ghostly sensation with a deep shudder. It was just the old rumors she'd heard. They were finally getting under her skin. Foolish tales of primeval, I don't know. I've never seen that word in my life before. Spirits guarding the forest, devouring the soul of anyone who ventured too deep. Of course, Esther never gave any credence to those stories. Nor would anybody with common sense for that matter. Ghosts simply didn't exist. Oh, if you only knew Esther. Still, the sooner she had a fire, the better. At last, Esther spotted a clearing just beyond the trees. With her bundle of sharp branches cradled in her arms, she hurried out into the open, anxious to finally set up camp. But as she stepped into the glade, and the shadows gave way to shapes, she froze. There, right in front of her eyes, a beautiful aged house rose amidst the darkness. It stood like an elusive mirage in the desert, too perfect and out of place to be true. Was it an illusion? Or, by some miracle, had she actually found the apothecary's estate? But surely the place was abandoned. It gave off an atmosphere far too lonely and desolate to be inhabited. Esther could barely discern any of its features, so thick were the shadows that shrouded the house's mountainous shape. A thick, swirling mist consumed the earth around its foundation, seeping across the ground like some poisonous cloud searching for intruders. Its very presence was waiting to reject her. This had to be it. A place that had evaded all maps. And yet she'd simply stumbled upon it. Something about that idea made a sense of deep apprehension crawl down her spine. In a trance between fear and fascination, she found herself moving across the clearing toward the manor entrance. The pale mist seeped around Esther's boots, swallowing her footsteps one by one. It felt like entering a dream, as if she were slowly crossing the threshold into a different reality. Until she realized that her fingertips were suddenly brushing cold metal. The handles for those foreboding doors loosely grasped beneath her uncertain, trembling palms. Please. The soft, nearly inaudible word left her lips like a whispered prayer. Slowly, gingerly, the handles began to turn. Until, with a softly beckoning creak, The doors yawned open to allow Esther within. Inside the house, the scent of musty, aged wood greeted her from the darkness. Just barely, Esther could make out the shape of a stairwell, illuminated by rays of moonlight. Something about it compelled her. Or perhaps it was simply less frightening than exploring past the pitch-black archway ahead. After a hesitant pause, she closed the doors behind her. The wind had started howling faintly, casting an eerie echo through the manor's foyer. Slowly, Esther crept up the stairs, wincing at the small creaks that followed her movements. The second floor held a number of rooms, their doors all ominously closed. On a nervous whim, Esther decided to reach for the second door on the right, inching it open with bated breath. The vacant room was a study? As her eyes drifted around the dark space, she could see rows of shelves stuffed with books, a cluttered desk, tables full of dusty alchemy equipment. A study. Esther's heart leapt in her chest. Even though the apothecary was no longer here, what if they'd left some of their research behind? With the light of day, she could comb through these books and papers. Surely there had to be something of use in them. Maybe. Just maybe. She had finally found a glimmer of hope to cling on to. Allowing herself a heavy sigh of relief, Esther closed the door behind her and stepped towards the small cot nearby. Cold as it was, at least she'd have a roof over her head and a bed to spend the night on. As if on cue, she felt a wave of exhaustion blanketing her mind. Maybe it was time to take her medicine and sleep. Even a few hours would be enough. Was that a creak? Esther froze, every inch of her body suddenly petrified. Yee! Something was right outside the door. A chilling tightness gripped Esther's chest. She couldn't breathe. Every instinct in her body told her to stay utterly silent. Don't let it sense you. Don't get caught. Don't move. Don't. Without warning, the door burst open. She had no choice but to look and see. Ah! Not a monster or a ghost. Only a young girl, trembling in obvious fright. You're... Who are you? Her fright slowly fading, the girl stared wide-eyed at Esther, still shaking a little. She'd probably been expecting to see a ghost too, and they ended up scaring each other equally. I'm Esther. Esther? That's your name? Esther nodded. And you're real. This isn't a dream, is it? No, I don't think so. This is kind of awkward. An awkward silence followed their strange conversation. Esther found herself wondering if maybe this actually was a dream after all. Really, it almost seemed too surreal to be anything else. After a long few moments, the girl's expression began to soften. She took a small, hesitant step towards Esther. then another, and another. I can't believe it! Another person came here, a real girl right in front of me. This is so exciting! Baffled, Esther gazed down at the delighted warm face beaming up at her. My name is... Sena? Or... Sena? I'm so happy to meet you, Esther. I was getting a drink from the well, so I didn't see or hear you come in. You must have thought the house was empty, right? I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to scare you, but well... Sienna? Yeah, maybe it is Sienna. Sienna let out a small nervous laugh, toying with the ribbons on her dress. You're the first person I've seen in 6 years. I never expected to find someone else here in the house, especially not in this room. Had Esther heard her right? Sienna had been living alone here for 6 years? Was it possible that she was the apothecary the rumors had talked about? Oh! You haven't eaten yet, have you, Esther? You look so tired and hungry. Gasping softly, Sienna reached out to clasp Esther's hand between her tiny palms. I'll light the fireplace, and you can get warm while I make some supper. That sounds nice, right? Come, let's go downstairs. All right. Taken aback by Sienna's eager offer, Esther hesitantly nodded. Even though she wanted to ask what Sienna knew about the cure, her stomach rumbled noisily at the thought of a warm dinner. It wouldn't hurt to wait until they'd eaten, surely. Still holding Esther's hand, Sienna led her back downstairs and into the parlor. As soon as she'd stuffed some wood into the fireplace and set it alight, the darkness suddenly lifted, melting into a cozy warmth thanks to the fire's cheerful crackling. Before she really knew what was happening, Esther found herself wrapped up in a pile of blankets sitting on the couch before the hearth. Sienna seemed like a little blur of happy energy, fussing over Esther one moment, then hurrying back to the kitchen to check on her soup. Clearly, she was delighted to have a visitor. Esther felt a little embarrassed, at a loss for how to deal with this unexpected kindness. Here we are! Eat it while it's warm! Before long, Sienna was nudging a bowl of steaming soup into Esther's hand. Filled to the brim with brightly colored vegetables and dark broth, it had a delectable scent rich with herbs and spices. Thank you. You don't need to thank me. There's plenty more in the pot if you're still hungry, so don't be shy. Oh, that reminds me. I have to clean the stove before my lamp goes out. I'll be right back. And then she was gone again, her light footsteps pattering over to the kitchen. As Esther gratefully ate her supper, she could see Sienna's figure darting back and forth, sipping a bowl of soup with one hand while scrubbing. While she scrubbed the stove with her other. At first, Esther found it almost impossible to believe. A small girl like Sienna living by herself in the wilderness, taking care of the whole manor. But from the natural, precarious way she seemed to handle everything, it didn't take long to realize she was in her element. Most of the older girls and boys from the city wouldn't be able to last a week out here without access to any of the normal comforts they took for granted. And yet, even while she toiled to beat the dwindling lamplight in her kitchen, Sienna looked as contented as a buzzing bee in a field of flowers. A few minutes after Esther finished her meal, Sienna wandered back into the parlor, wearing a satisfied smile. Kitchen is clean, and you've eaten. I hope the fire got you nice and warm, too. It did. Thank you again for taking care of me. Oh, please, don't worry about it, really, Esther. Actually... She gave a tiny, sheepish laugh, her pale cheeks turning slightly pink. I already cleaned the stove yesterday, but I was so excited and nervous for meeting you that I had to calm down a bit. Cleaning always makes me calmer, so I'm glad I have a big house like this. It always gives me lots to do. I'm sure the house is glad to have you too. I really hope so. Beaming brightly, Sienna flopped down on the cushions beside Esther, dangling her legs over the sofa's edge. Another short, awkward pause soon followed. Sienna fidgeted a little, staring at the fireplace intently, as if she were too shy to start up the conversation again. After a hesitant pause, Esther decided to finally break the silence. She had to ask the question that had burned in her mind from the moment they'd met. Sienna, are you the apothecary that lives in these woods? Esther's words made Sienna abruptly stiffen. Where did you hear about an apothecary? In one of the towns nearby. People said there was a hermit living out here, an apothecary who used to live in the city. Somebody who found a cure for the pale. All of a sudden, Sienna's cheerful energy seemed to slowly dissipate. Her gaze drifted down to the floor, lingering there as if anchored by a heavy weight. I'm sorry, Esther. The apothecary, it's not me. It's... Sienna grasped the fabric of her dress, squeezing it tightly. It's one of her parents who died, isn't it? It was my father. Oh, I was right. It's true that he had the pale, and he managed his symptoms for a while. But he died 6 years ago. Just like that, disappointment shattered Esther's heart. But even more acutely, she felt a sudden pang of sympathy for Sienna. How it must have felt to lose her father so young, living all alone in this deep forest. I'm sorry. Sienna gave her a small, sad smile, gently shaking her head as if to reassure Esther it was all right. But she offered no other reply, and stayed unusually silent, swallowing hard once or twice. I'll leave tomorrow morning, then. There's no reason for me to cause you any more trouble. You could still stay here. What? She stared at Sienna in surprise, taken aback by the girl's sudden interjection. I'm sorry, my roommate called me earlier and it really threw off everything. I mean, stay here to look at Papa's research. He has a lot of papers and books in his study, and journals too, although he told me never to look at them. But Papa spent a lot of time working, and I know he took notes about the pale. So if you stay and read through them, you might find something about the cure, right? Her voice quivering slightly, Sienna turned to gaze at Esther with a hopeful, eager smile. Thank you, but I don't want to stay here and be a burden. Oh, Esther, you never be a burden. You barely ate anything, and you're so quiet and kind. Really, why don't you stay? Esther gave her a hesitant look. As much as she wanted to accept Sienna's kind offer, it just didn't seem right. After all, Sienna obviously worked hard to take care of this place, but Esther didn't have any way to repay her hospitality. Well, if you're going to be very stubborn about it, you can help out with chores during the day and look over Papa's research after. As if she'd easily guessed the source of Esther's reluctance, Sienna gave her a reassuring, cheerful nod. I have a lot of food and wood stored from winter still, anyway, so it's really fine. Please, don't worry about it. Esther studied Sienna's expression, those shining eyes that were all but begging her to stay. At least if she helped out with the work, she'd feel better about spending a week or two here, even if it still struck her as taking advantage of Sienna's loneliness. All right. You sure I won't be burdening you? Yes, yes! Yes, I'm positively, absolutely! Halfway through her delighted cry, Sienna suddenly cut herself off with a gasp. Oh, I forgot. You have it, right? The pail. Esther nodded, puzzled at Sienna's sudden question. I won't ask you to do any chores then. That wouldn't be fair. Papa told me how awful it always made him feel. He couldn't even get out of bed some days. I'm sorry I had to pause, because this is actually starting to make me cry. Okay. It must be terrible, being so drained all the time, no matter how much you rest. It's fine, I can work. But... to be honest, the longer I don't do anything, the worse I feel. It's hard to push myself, but it's better than when I don't. Oh my god! I'm literally crying. Oh, this hit me. Oh god, this hit me really hard. It was Sienna's turn to hesitate, but Esther offered a small, determined smile to reassure her it was all right. She hated when people pitied her or went easy on her. It bothered Esther even more than the symptoms themselves. If you're sure, then. You know yourself better than I do, it's true. She giggled, clearly overjoyed that Esther had agreed not to leave. Then it's a deal? You'll stay and go over Papa's research and help me out with the work during the day? After a brief pause, Esther dipped her head in silent agreement. We'll start tomorrow then. I'm so excited. I could show you the well, the gardens, the stream, the cemetery. We could pick flowers and have a picnic and read by the fireplace and... She trailed off, biting her lip with a dawning look of embarrassment. Sorry. I get a bit carried away sometimes. It's all right. For a long pause, they were both They were both silent again. But the pause was warmer, gentler, like one between friends. The fireplace's soft crackling echoed in the parlor, a comfort against the howling wind outside. "Well, you're probably exhausted, aren't you? Why don't you sleep here by the fire? I could bring more blankets so you can have a good night's rest." "I think I have enough blankets," Esther mumbled, still cocooned in the numerous woolly sheets Sienna had wrapped around her earlier. "You may say that now, but you can never have too many blankets. It gets quite drafty in here at night." Huddling a little deeper into the warm covers, Esther offered Sienna a small, grateful smile. "Well, if you need me for anything, my room is upstairs, right next to Papa's office. I'm quite tired too, so I think I'll head off to sleep." With a lengthy yawn, Sienna stretched her arms over her head, then hopped up to her feet. The darkness clouding her features earlier had all but vanished, but now she beamed as radiantly as the sun. "Good night, Esther. I hope you have wonderful dreams." "Good night, Sienna. Thank you, really." She gave Esther a long, heartfelt smile, one that seemed wise and peaceful beyond her years somehow. After that last look, Sienna finally turned away, her light footfalls pattering towards the stairs. Esther watched her go, listening in something of a daze until she heard the bedroom door softly click shut. The past hour almost felt like a dream itself, and Esther half expected to awaken by a shoddy campfire at any moment. Her hopes for finding a cure had been dashed, rekindled, dashed, and rekindled once more. And now she was reluctant to let her expectations run too high. She could stay here for a little while, going through the apothecary's research in search of any clues, but there was no guarantee she'd find anything of use. Still, it was the only thing she had to go on. And if there was a chance she wouldn't return home empty-handed, then it was worth giving it a try. And Sienna... what a strange, remarkable girl. She'd survived out here alone for 6 years, suffered the death of her father, and yet somehow still remained as buoyant as a feather. Esther found it hard not to be deeply curious about her, and envious of all of her whirlwind energy and excitement. It reminded her of a time not so long ago, back when she used to be like Sienna. With a quiet sigh, Esther reached down into her satchel. Before she slept, there was one thing she had to do. Just like every night. Slowly, Esther pulled out a fine silver pocket watch, its thin hands marking the time. But when she pressed one of its buttons, the back abruptly popped open, revealing a tiny glistening syringe. With a practiced motion, she jabbed the needle right into her arm. It stung even more than usual. As the seconds passed, Esther watched her blood slowly filter up through the syringe, into the watch's mechanisms. Then, after a long few moments, the flow stopped, and the blood reversed its course, oozing downward back into her body. As it returned beneath Esther's flesh, a dark circle slowly spread around the pierced spot. She kept her focus on the watch's face. 2, 5, 8. The hour hands started swiveling forward. 10, 14, 18. 24. The last drops pushed into her vein. Wincing, Esther pulled the needle free, closing the watch with a hasty squeeze of her palm. This medicine of hers. A marvel of technology, they called it. But Esther hated the needle far more than drinking the normal tonic. If only it was easier to bring the ingredients with her everywhere. Right now, she didn't have much choice beyond the watch, which injected a potent version of the remedy into her veins once a day. And yet, despite her reliance on the watch, or maybe because of it, Esther longed to be able to cast the twisted thing into a fire like the one before her now. Dropping the watch back into her satchel, she curled up tightly beneath her blankets. The parlor felt colder and less cozy now that she was alone again. But as she closed her eyes, all of Esther's exhaustion caught up with her at once, weighing down on her body like a heavy sheet. Before long, the crackle of the fireplace lulled her to sleep, sheltered from the cold night outside. And all her restless thoughts gave way to a deep darkness. And I think that is a fantastic place to stop. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know how... Ooh, achievement unlocked. Medicate. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Because so far, I am absolutely loving this. It has, hit me straight in the heart. So many times already. And we're only in the beginning. So, oh my god, I already know that this is gonna be an emotional whirlwind, a freaking roller coaster of everything, and I should not be lifting my arm right now as I am, because I just got my vaccine, or the first dose of the vaccine yesterday, as I'm recording, and my arm really hurts, so I really should not be lifting it as I am, but... you know what? I'm excited. So, yeah. Thank you guys so much. Please, 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 please go and buy this game on Steam. Just, look it up on Steam. I will also have the link to the game below in the description. So go and support the developers. Go and support them, please. This is incredible. So, I love you guys so much, and I will see you next time. Bye!